Hello, and welcome to channel Ein Our Key, and I am your host, Voluntary. For years, Mr. Kent Hovind has been asking people to supply their 3 best lines of evidence for evolution. He made this an open challenge. Anyone could attempt to provide evidence and convince him, and he would take them up on the debate challenge. He advertises his toll-free phone number so that anyone who wants to could take up the challenge. He doesn't say that you have to have so many subscribers. He doesn't set any minimum threshold. He leaves this challenge open. Many people have responded to his arguments, although not always to him directly. Thunderfoot cut his teeth and made his channel grow by responding to Venomfang X, and Venomfang X was merely repeating Kent's arguments. He was repeating them word for word, down to the humorous asides. Logic did the same when responding to John Morris Pendleton, chemist, scientist, automechanic. And just like Venomfang X, John Morris Pendleton, chemist, scientist, automechanic, was parroting Mr. Hovind's arguments. Even I faced Mr. Hovind's arguments in the past when I started dating creationism back on Usenet. Yes, Usenet does still exist, and I participated in it a few decades ago before Google decided to kill it. There was another poster repeating Mr. Hovind's arguments, a fellow by the name of Jason Gastrich. He not only used his arguments, he even ordered a degree from an unaccredited institution so he could also call himself a doctor just like Mr. Hovind did. Well, I posted my video. I had 2 introductory points and 3 lines of evidence. And Mr. Hovind did give a very brief response. What was his response to my first introductory point, differentiating between the word evolution and the theory of evolution? Okay, what then was his response to my second introductory point about multiple lines of evidence? Nothing there either. Now for the meatiest one. I personally consider my first line of evidence to be the most important of them, that beneficial mutations happen. What was Mr. Hovind's response? Now we come to what he actually responded to, my second line of evidence, that natural selection happens. I gave several examples of natural selection, and one of those examples was the peppered moths. What did he say?
A-Y-N. How would you pronounce that? Ian? Ian? Ian?
INR.
INR. Ian. He says, Kent says he wants debates, but I sent him a link to my video on 3 lines of evidence and he refused. College professors teaching at SpongeBob universities are afraid to debate Kent publicly. Aaron Key refused how? Quit lying. Well, here is Aaron Key's YouTube channel. He has 6 subscribers. He did a short course on clades, has 29 views from 2 months ago. He wears a mask and talks funny through the whole thing. I suspect that's maybe a basement window in a mother's house, okay? Just don't know. Aaron, your 3 lines of evidence for evolution. I did listen to part of it. You challenging me to a debate is like a 4th grader challenging Muhammad Ali to a fight. Muhammad Ali would refuse, wouldn't he?
Well, he wouldn't want to hurt the poor guy.
Aaron, I don't want to hurt you, okay? But I did listen to part of your diatribe. Very difficult to listen to with a stupid mask on. Take it off, okay? But
What's he going to do, jump out the window?
yeah, you can't jump out the window because you land on the ground. For someone who keeps saying he will debate anyone, you sure seemed reluctant when I contacted you. Aaron Key, ha 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 ha. Westy, please, we aren't fooled by the fact that you want to have some advantage in the forum of debate and Kent won't allow it. Go cry somewhere else, like atheist sites as they will believe just about anything you cry about. That's the truth.
A lot of personal insults thrown in there.
Okay, Mr. Aaron Key, one of the evidences you gave in your little...
Anarchy.
Huh?
Anarchy.
Oh, anarchy.
Scholar must
A-Y-N would not be Ann. Ann Rand. Anarchy. Okay. I'm sorry if I mispronunciated it, okay? One of the three best evidences you gave for evolution was the peppered moth. How many have ever heard of the peppered moth? There's a moth over in England and Ireland that has little spots all over the wings, and they call it the peppered moth. It looks like somebody sprinkled pepper on it. Here's the story they tell in the textbooks. There's a whole 5 shelves of them right here. They say the peppered moths in England were light colored, and once in a while a black baby would be born in the peppered moth family, a mutated, variations in the color. Some were spotted white and black spots, some were black. But because the trees were light colored, this is how the story goes, the birds could see the dark ones. They stick out like a sore thumb, eat the dark moth. And the white ones survived and they had more babies. Then they started burning coal in the factories. Those dirty industrialists, polluted the air. And the trees turned black from the coal soot. This is the story. Now the moths that were black blended in and the white ones could be seen. So the birds ate the white ones, leaving the black ones to have more babies. This is the story they tell. They say that it was 95% white moths and only 5% black. During the Industrial Revolution, it changed to 5% light and 95% dark. This is the story in a typical textbook, okay? 95%, okay.
So far, so good.
This is a lie proven wrong years ago. They glued dead moths to the tree to take that picture. After 40 years of looking for moths on the tree trunks, they found a grand total in 40 years of 2. The moths don't rest on the tree trunks. They rest up in the branches and the leaves. So they had to glue dead moths to the tree trunk to take the picture. This is lie number 21 of my series on lies in the textbooks. Okay? But they still present it as evidence for evolution. What is 95% of 2? Can somebody get a calculator? Anarchy? Do some math, son, okay?
There we go. That's the reason you didn't dare show your audience my clip. I had already addressed those objections. You claim nobody saw moths on tree trunks, that moths don't rest on tree trunks, and you objected to the photos being staged. Let's take a look at what I said. Number 2. Natural selection happens. There are many examples of this. Now, natural selection doesn't need for the trait to be brand new. A trait that exists in a minority of the population can become more prevalent until it exists in a majority of the population if environmental pressures make that trait preferable. Then, if environmental pressures change back, that trait can go back from majority to minority. Which brings us to one of the most famous examples of natural selection. It is only an example of natural selection. It is not an example of random mutation or any other aspect of evolution. It is the peppered moths that you and Aaron Raw discussed. I already know what you're going to say. The photographs were staged. Moths don't rest on tree trunks. That is what you said to Aaron Raw. Well, moths do sometimes rest on tree trunks. This has indeed been observed. Statements about some people who didn't see it are counter-indicated by statements by others who did see it. So the only criticism is that the photographs were staged. The answer to that is to say, so what? You can't always get a good photograph, so you have to stage it. I recently took a family photo. My family doesn't always stand still in front of a backdrop in our good clothing. Does that mean it isn't a real photograph of my family? Given that the only real criticism of the pepper moth study is that some of the photos were staged, that basically concedes that the frequency of different colors does indeed change with environmental pressures. That is not the only example, but it is one of the best. Other examples include the prevalence of smaller tusks on elephant as a response to poaching. Those with larger tusks are more likely to be poached. Those with smaller tusks survived, so those with smaller tusks reproduced. Then there is the prevalence of certain types of crabs in the fishing waters around Japan. Some of them had shells that looked more like faces, and those were thrown back. Since they were thrown back, they bred more and their numbers increased in proportion to those crabs whose shells didn't look like faces. Now we've got the mechanism for evolution covered. We have both random mutation and natural selection. We have evidence that it does happen. Now we need evidence that it did happen. That brings us to our third line of evidence.
So it looks like I addressed your objections before you even made them and spoke about more than peppered moths. That explains why you didn't show my clip to your audience. It is my style to try to anticipate my opponent's objections before he makes them and address them ahead of time. Since you never change your arguments, not once in decades, I didn't even have to anticipate. If your audience saw me pointing out your counter-arguments before you even make them, and why they are wrong, even your hand-picked audience would have a hard time not noticing the lies you tell. Here's the sad part. The peppered moths were only an example of my second line of evidence. They were not themselves the second line of evidence. Technically, you didn't actually address my second line of evidence. But then again, you didn't address my third either. While my first line of evidence is the one I consider the best line of evidence, the third line of evidence is the one I consider the most fun. I find it interesting, though, that natural selection happens is the one line of evidence you responded to. I'm going to respond by reading a passage from something I found online regarding natural selection. For instance, if we released hundreds of rabbits in an area with cold winters, only the animals with the heavier fur would survive. So within a few years, the population would have a little heavier fur than the earlier populations. These small micro-population shifts brought about by the environment are referred to as microevolution. There has been no change in the genetic material of the rabbit. There has only been a change in the ratio of the population. You have the same kind of animal. If that climate were to change back to a milder climate, the population of animals would change back to having lighter fur. There are a few problems with what I just read. First of all, the author cannot tell the difference between microevolution and natural selection. Second, he uses the undefined term, kind, which makes that whole part of it meaningless. Still, overall, the author of that bit of prose did recognize that environmental pressures do cause changes to the proportions of the population. The author of that is a Mr. Kent Hovind, and the writing is from his dissertation for Doctor of Philosophy in Christian Education at Patriot University. That brings up an interesting question. The peppered moth example was simply used to highlight changes in proportions of the population. What I just quoted also highlights changes in the proportions of the population. Was Mr. Kent Hovind wrong when he wrote that in his doctoral dissertation?
Hypothesis explaining the replacement of light-colored moths by dark-colored moths can be formed by using Darwin's theory of evolution by natural selection. So the theory is that they were selected because they blended in better. Okay. Peppered moth and industrial melanism. The Industrial Revolution polluted the trees, and so the dark moths survived. This is the story. Here's a display in the Tulsa Zoo. When I was there back in 2000, somebody take a modern picture, if they're still using it, please, if you live near Tulsa. This is one of their evidences for evolution, the peppered moth. What happened, Dr. Kettlewell from Oxford in United Kingdom introduced the peppered moth melanism story in 1955 as evidence for evolution by natural selection. Since then, it's appeared in almost every biology text as evidence for evolution. Read the publication Evolution in Action. The moths do not rest on the tree trunks. Anarchy. Exactly 2 moths have been seen on the tree trunks in more than 40 years. Kettlewell glued 2 dead moths on the tree trunk to take his famous photograph. Moths have no tendency to choose matching backgrounds. They don't care if they're landing on a light tree or dark tree. Okay? Kettlewell's results have not been duplicated in later studies. The shift in moth population did occur, but it took place well before new lichens grew on polluted trees. A parallel shift in moth population occurred in the U.S. industrial areas, but there was no change in the lichens. Peppered moth by Kettlewell. Okay. The peppered moth is great proof of design. God wants to make sure those critters survive no matter what happens to the background. So he produced them to produce a variety of offspring. Some have light color, some have dark color. This is called planning ahead.
They're still moths.
They're still moths. They're still peppered moths. They're still interfertile with each other. Did you know Ford and General Motors and I think Honda put both heaters and air conditioners in some of their cars? Whoa. I think that's called planning ahead. They don't know if that car is going to hot climate or cold climate, do they? How many of you have ever seen one of those cars that actually has a heater and an air conditioner? You can choose either one. You ever seen one of them? Yeah. Wow. That's proof of intelligent design. So if the moth is able to produce 2 different colors of babies, maybe that's proof the Creator was thinking ahead. Make sure some survive. Here's the conclusions from the peppered moth experiment. Moth population ratio shifted from mostly white to mostly black as the trees turned black. That's the story. The moth population was able to adapt to the new environment. This helps prove we all came from a rock. Anarchy, that's your evidence for evolution. The peppered moth? I downloaded this about an hour ago. The evolution of the peppered moth is an evolutionary instance of directional color change in the moth population as a consequence of air pollution during the Industrial Revolution. The frequency of dark-colored moths increased at that time, an example of industrial melanism. You're saying this is one of I asked you to give the best 3 evidences for evolution. This is one of those you gave. I didn't even listen to the 3rd one yet. I don't want to embarrass you, okay? This is downloaded today, a couple hours ago. Peppered moth and natural selection. The peppered moth is widespread in Britain and Ireland and frequently found in ordinary something or other. It is one of the best known examples of evolution. Listen to this. It is one of the best known examples of evolution by natural selection. If that's the best you've got, you are really desperate. Yep.
No, I said it was an example of the second line of evidence.
What was his other one?
I don't remember. It's hard to listen to the guy with that mask on. He can't.
He had blood on his hands too, I remember that.
Huh?
His hands were painted red.
I don't know. The peppered moth is an example of evolution in action. Okay, right. Why is the peppered moth an example of natural selection? Peppered moths, an example of natural selection. Light-colored peppered moths were no longer well camouflaged on the darkened tree trunks. The dark-colored moths, however, were well camouflaged. Because predators were able to spot the light moths more easily, the dark moths were more likely to survive and reproduce. They're still teaching this today. This is baloney.
I wonder why butterflies are orange, yellow, red, and blue. That doesn't camouflage.
How many animals do not blend in with their? Look at a peacock. Wow. And listen to the noise they make. Boy, I wonder where the peacock is.
So we have like this, it's called Flower World. It's next to our house.
Yep.
And there's peacocks there.
Yeah.
And we escaped and it was on our neighbor's driveway. We could hear it's like,
They're real easy to spot, aren't they?
being cut. It's just
So
screaming.
natural selection selected the peacock to look that way, huh? How about the parrots? How many parrots are there that are just wild colors? How about me with my Hawaiian shirts? I mean, stand up. Yes, sir.
Or a flamingo.
A flamingo. I mean, go on and on and on. You think the peppered moth is the best example for evolution? Gee. Peppered moths, an evolutionary icon, are back. How evolution's poster child from Evolution News. It's been called one of the best examples of evolution observed in the wild. Okay. Evolution, the peppered moth, a seasoned survivor. Ask a biologist. Okay. Tell you what, ask a biologist. Listen carefully. You get all the biologists in the world. Get them all together. I will debate them all same time. Half my brain tied behind my back and one eye closed and 1 foot off the floor to make it fair. On the condition we talk about one topic at a time. There's no interruptions. Okay? And I get half the time. If there's 50 of them and 1 of me, fine. Hey, Elijah went up against 850 at once. Whooped them all. It's not because I'm smarter than them, because they're defending a really stupid theory. It's really stupid to believe you came from a rock 4.6 billion years ago. Okay. Study confirms truth behind Darwin's moth. Downloaded a few minutes ago from phys.org. Aaron?
Anarchy.
I'm sorry.
Are
Take the mask off, okay? I'll debate you face to face, okay? Give me something better than the peppered moth, okay? What are your next 3 best evidences for evolution? Okay. An excellent book showing the facts about the peppered moth, Icons of Evolution. Do we sell this one?
No, we don't.
We used to. We should. Google that. We got to put, that's an excellent book, okay?
But you won't debate me. I know why, though. This isn't about half the time. It is about the format of my challenge. I challenged you to a video response debate like you did with Aaron Ra. You talked a lot about how you enjoyed having a pause button to use on Aaron Ra. But in truth, you found out what he could do if he had a pause button and are terrified of what I would do if I had a pause button. The thing is, Mr. Hovind, you are good at talking. You are very good at talking. Now compare to someone with autism. I know someone who is very smart, but not good at communicating. You have to press him to get him to tell you about some of the things that he knows. If you work with him, you can actually learn a great deal from him. Now you are a good communicator. You can talk at length about any subject, even when you know nothing about the subject, and present such an air of confidence that only those who actually know the subject would be able to detect how little you actually know. Your speaking ability reminds me somewhat of another person who is noted for his communication skills, President Bill Clinton. He could also talk about any subject and make it look like he knew what he was talking about. I am sure that no matter the topic, you could win a live debate against someone who is a subject matter expert but not a good communicator. You could easily beat someone with autism, for example, because while the autist is brilliant, he is not a good communicator. You are the exact opposite. That is why you can be completely and utterly wrong and still win a debate. That's why you enjoy live debates. so much and don't want to do the video format again. Well, Mr. Hovind, although you responded with third-grade insults and by ignoring my content, I'm still going to treat you as if you are an honest adult and give you the opportunity to actually address my points. But if you choose not to, don't worry. I have another project in mind for you. You see, I was able to get that quote from your dissertation because I have a copy of your dissertation. And if we do not engage in debate, I suppose I will review your dissertation the same way Rachel Oates reviewed Are You Being Brainwashed? You mocked Simon Dan for not immediately accepting your challenge at the time you made it, before he had a chance to respond. What should I make of you running from my debate challenge? Links to my initial video and to his response are in the description. Thank you for watching. We're now in the double digits for subscribers, and hopefully we will only keep growing. So please like, share, comment, and subscribe to help my channel grow.